Ali Dia is the gold standard for Premier League deception. In November 1996, Southampton manager Graham Souness received a phone call from a man claiming to be the legendary George Weah. The voice on the other end told Souness that his cousin, Ali Dia, had played for Paris Saint-Germain and had 13 caps for Senegal. None of it was true. Dia was actually a semi-pro player who had just been rejected by Gillingham. Souness, desperate for reinforcements, bid on the bait without a single trial or scouting report. Dia was named on the bench against Leeds United just days later. When club legend Matthew Le Tissier went off injured after 32 minutes, the miracle happened. Dia stepped onto a Premier League pitch. His performance was legendary for all the wrong reasons. He wandered around the pitch like a spectator who had accidentally wandered through the security gates. Le Tissier later described it as watching a gazelle on ice. Dia was subbed off 53 minutes later, and by Monday morning, he had vanished from the hotel, leaving an unpaid bill behind. He played 43 minutes of top-flight football, recorded 0 stats, and became a permanent fixture in the Hall of Shame. After his brief brush with fame, he played for Gateshead and eventually earned a degree in business from Northumbria University. His career wasn't about talent, it was about the greatest con in sporting history. His impact was microscopic, but his legacy is the first thing every fan mentions when discussing the worst of the worst. Bebe signed for Manchester United in 2010 for a fee of £7.4 million, a move that still baffles the footballing world. Sir Alex Ferguson admitted he had never seen the winger play, the only time in his 26-year career he bought a player based solely on a recommendation from his assistant, Carlos Queiroz. Bebe had been playing in the Portuguese 3rd Division and had briefly appeared for Vitória de Guimarães in pre-season. He arrived at Old Trafford with a rag-to-riches story, having grown up in a homeless shelter, but the fairy tale hit a wall the moment he stepped on the grass. His crossing was erratic, often landing in the stands rather than near a teammate. In a League Cup game against Wolves, he produced a performance so disjointed that fans started wondering if he had won a competition to be there. Across 2 seasons, he made just 2 Premier League appearances, totaling 75 minutes. He never scored a league goal and never looked like he belonged in a United shirt. However, just like some of the NBA cult icons, he found a second act. He moved to Spain, reinvented himself as a reliable winger for Rayo Vallecano, and even scored a long-range screamer for Cape Verde in the 2024 Africa Cup of Nations. While his time at United was a statistical disaster, he carved out a respectable career elsewhere. His story isn't one of failure, but of a player who was thrust into a spotlight he wasn't ready for. Winston Bogarde is the ultimate cautionary tale of the Premier League's financial boom. Chelsea signed the Dutch defender in 2000 on a 4-year contract worth £40,000 a week. The problem was that the manager who signed him, Gianluca Vialli, was sacked almost immediately. The new manager, Claudio Ranieri, didn't want him. Most players would have moved on to find playing time, but Bogarde looked at his contract and decided to stay. He commuted from Amsterdam for training, sat on the bench, and collected his check. Over 4 seasons, he made just 9 Premier League appearances. He famously said, "This world is about money, so when you are offered those millions, you take them." He was the first true bench warmer of the modern era, a player who chose financial security over a sporting legacy. Chelsea tried everything to get him to leave, making him train with the youth team, taking away his locker, but he wouldn't budge. He retired in 2004 having earned over £8 million for essentially doing nothing. After football, he faced financial struggles and eventually moved into coaching, working as an assistant at Ajax. His stats were non-existent, but his name remains synonymous with the contract killer mentality. Savio Nsereko arrived at West Ham in 2009 for a club record fee of £9 million. He was 19 years old, had a handful of games for Brescia in Serie B, and was touted as the next big thing in European football. He lasted 6 months. He made 10 appearances, 0 goals, and looked physically bullied by every defender he faced. The Hammers sold him to Fiorentina for half the price just 6 months later. From there, his career became a bizarre journey through the lower leagues of Germany, Bulgaria, Romania, and even Kazakhstan. In 2012, he was reportedly arrested in Thailand for faking his own kidnapping to extort money from his family. His fall from a record-breaking Premier League signing to a journeyman was startlingly fast. His defense of his talent was non-existent. His impact on the pitch was a ghost. He represents the danger of overhyping youth based on a few highlight reels. Jozy Altidore is a player whose Premier League stats read like a horror story for strikers. He had 2 separate spells in England, first with Hull City and later with Sunderland. At Hull, he scored 1 goal in 28 games. At Sunderland, he was signed for £13 million in 2013 and managed exactly 1 goal in 42 Premier League appearances. That's 2 goals in 70 games for a man whose primary job was to score. He was strong, he was fast, and he looked the part. but the moment the ball arrived in the box, the composure vanished. His shooting accuracy was among the lowest in the league's history for a starting forward. Despite the drought, he remained a hero for the US national team, scoring 42 goals for his country. He eventually found his home in MLS with Toronto FC, where he became a legend, winning titles and scoring at a prolific rate. His Premier League stint was a case of right player, wrong league. He couldn't handle the speed of English defenders, but his career in North America proved he wasn't a bad player, just a bad fit for the toughest league in the world. Massimo Taibi was nicknamed the Blind Venetian after just 4 games for Manchester United. Signed for £4.5 million in 1999 to replace Peter Schmeichel, Taibi actually started well, winning man of the match on his debut against Liverpool despite a few shaky moments. But the collapse was imminent. Against Southampton, he allowed a weak, trickling shot from Matt Letizia to go right through his legs. It is still cited as the worst goalkeeping error in the history of Old Trafford. In his next game, Chelsea put 5 past him. Ferguson had seen enough. Taibi was shipped back to Italy after just 360 minutes of football. He went on to have a long and successful career in Serie A with Reggina and Atlanta, proving he was a capable keeper. But in England, he is remembered only for that one slip under his body. His career stats in the PL: 4 games, 11 goals conceded. He currently serves as a sporting director in Italy, but he still avoids talking about that rainy afternoon against the Saints. For more on the trauma of these errors, my video on every fanbase's most painful moment dives into the Letizia goal that effectively ended Taibi's English career. Junior Lewis is a name that Leicester City fans still whisper with a shudder. He was the ultimate manager's favorite. Peter Taylor, who managed him at Gillingham, brought him to Leicester in 2001. Lewis was a tall, gangly midfielder who seemed to operate in slow motion while the rest of the league was at full sprint. Fans famously joke that he was technically not a footballer. He made 20 appearances for the Foxes, and in almost every one, he looked like a man who had won a raffle to be on the pitch. He didn't score, he rarely tackled, and his passing was safe to a fault. When Taylor was sacked, Lewis's Premier League career ended instantly. He followed Taylor to various lower league clubs, including Hull and Stevenage. He eventually moved into coaching, often working alongside, you guessed it, Peter Taylor. His legacy is one of loyalty over ability, a player who stayed in the top flight far longer than his skill set should have allowed. Afonso Alves arrived at Middlesbrough in 2008 with one of the most terrifying scoring records in Europe. He had scored 45 goals in 39 games for Heerenveen in the Eredivisie, including 7 goals in a single match. Borough broke their transfer record, paying £12.7 million to bring the Brazilian to Teesside. He scored twice against Manchester United and a hat-trick against Manchester City in an 8-1 win, but those were the exceptions. Most weeks, he was anonymous. He lacked the physicality to lead the line and the work rate to help a struggling team. He finished his Borough career with 10 goals in 42 games, a return that saw the club relegated. He moved to Qatar in 2009, where he returned to scoring regularly. But his time in England remains a warning about the Eredivisie trap, where huge numbers in Holland don't always translate to the Premier League. His defense of his record was that the service wasn't good enough. The fans' defense was that he simply wasn't up to the task. Christian Poulsen was the face of the darkest era in Liverpool's modern history. Signed by Roy Hodgson in 2010 to replace Javier Mascherano, Poulsen was meant to be the experienced anchor in midfield. Instead, he was a liability. He was frequently caught in possession, his turning circle was compared to a cruise ship, and he struggled with the intensity of the English press. He made only 12 appearances before Kenny Dalglish took over and immediately sidelined him. Poulsen had a fantastic career otherwise, winning titles in Denmark, Germany, and Holland, and earned 92 caps for Denmark. But at Liverpool, he was the symbol of a recruitment strategy that had completely lost its way. He moved to Evian in France and then back to Ajax, where he regained his form. His time at Anfield was short, painful, and statistically underwhelming, but he remains a respected figure in European coaching today. Milton Nunez, or Tyson, as he was known, is the subject of one of the weirdest transfer stories in history. Sunderland signed the Honduran striker in 2000 for £1.6 million. Peter Reid, the manager at the time, later admitted that the club might have signed the wrong player. Nunez was tiny, standing just 5 feet 4 inches, and was supposedly not the target the scouts had recommended. He made 1 start and 1 substitute appearance, totaling 59 minutes of football. He never scored, never assisted, and barely touched the ball. He spent the rest of his career in Mexico and Guatemala, where he became a prolific scorer and a national icon, playing until he was 46 years old. In Central America, he is a legend. In the northeast of England, he is a punchline. His story is the definition of a transfer miss, both literally and figuratively. Marco Boogers is a West Ham legend for all the wrong reasons. Harry Redknapp signed the Dutch forward in 1995 for £1 million after seeing a video of him. Boogers' debut against Manchester United ended with him being sent off for a horror tackle on Gary Neville. After just 4 appearances, he reportedly suffered a mental breakdown and vanished. Rumors spread that he was living in a caravan in a Dutch park, though he later clarified he was just at his parents' house. He never played for the Hammers again. He returned to the Netherlands and had a solid career with RKC Waalwijk and Volendam. His Premier League legacy is 90% myth and 10% red card. He currently works as a technical director, but to West Ham fans of a certain age, he is simply the man in the caravan. Konstantinos Mitroglou was the panic buy that defined Fulham's 2014 relegation. They paid £12 million for the Greek striker in January, hoping his Champions League form for Olympiacos would save them. He arrived injured, lacked fitness, and played only 151 minutes across 3 games. He didn't score. Fulham went down, and Mitroglou was loaned back to Olympiacos, then Benfica, where he immediately started scoring again. He ended up having a great career in Portugal and France, proving he was a top-tier finisher. But at Fulham, he was an expensive ghost. He was the player who was supposed to be the savior but ended up being a symbol of the club's poor planning. His stats: 3 games, 0 goals, £12 million spent. Jean-Alain Boumsong is a name that Newcastle fans still find difficult to process. After a decent spell at Rangers, Newcastle paid £8 million for the French defender in 2005. On paper, he had the physical attributes of an elite centre-back, but on the pitch, he was a disaster zone. His positioning was erratic, and he had a terrifying tendency to fall over at key moments. His partnership with Titus Bramble became a comedy duo for opposing strikers. Despite his struggles in England, he was somehow called up to the France squad for the 2006 World Cup and later earned a move to Juventus. He won titles in France and Greece, but his time at St. James Park was defined by high-profile errors. His defense was non-existent. His legacy is one of frustration. Ricky van Wolfswinkel was Norwich City's big hope in 2013. They paid £8.5 million for the striker who had been prolific at Sporting CP. He scored on his debut against Everton with a beautiful header, and the Carrow Road faithful thought they had found a star. He didn't score again for the rest of the season. 25 games, 1 goal. He looked completely lost in the physicality of the Premier League. He spent the next few years on loan in Spain and France before finding his scoring boots again in Switzerland and back in the Netherlands. In 2024, he was still scoring for FC Twente, proving he never lost his touch. He just lost his way in England. He is a prime example of a player who couldn't adapt to the pace of the game, turning a record transfer into a relegation-inducing disappointment. Bosko Balaban is the man Aston Villa fans call the Invisible Man. Signed for £5.8 million in 2001, Balaban was a regular for the Croatian national team. He stayed at Villa for 2.5 years and never started a single Premier League game. He made 8 substitute appearances, scored 0 goals, and was eventually released for free. He went back to Club Brugge and became a goal-scoring machine again, proving that the talent was there. But at Villa Park, he was a total non-entity. He earned a high wage to watch football from the best seats in the house. His time in Birmingham is remembered as one of the worst pieces of business the club ever conducted. Corrado Grabbi was the record signing for Blackburn Rovers in 2001. Graham Souness, him again, paid £6.7 million for the Italian striker. Grabbi struggled with the weather, the food, and the style of play. He scored just 2 goals in 30 appearances and famously stated that his teammates were cold toward him. He was a player of immense technical ability who simply couldn't handle the cultural shift. He returned to Italy and spent the rest of his career in the lower tiers. While his stats were poor, he is often remembered with a bit of sympathy rather than anger. A man who was simply miserable in his surroundings. Eric Djemba-Djemba, so good they named him twice, except he wasn't. Manchester United signed him in 2003 as a potential successor to Roy Keane. He was aggressive and physical, but he lacked the tactical discipline to play for a top-tier side. He is perhaps best remembered for a Rabona pass that went nowhere and for filing for bankruptcy shortly after leaving the club despite earning millions. He made 20 appearances for United before moving to Aston Villa, where he was equally unimpressive. His career took him to Qatar, Denmark, Israel, Serbia, and India. He even played for a team in the Swiss 5th Division in his late 30s. He had the energy of a top player but the execution of a journeyman. His legacy is a cautionary tale about the pressure of replacing a legend. Andrea Silenzi was the first Italian to ever play in the Premier League. Nottingham Forest signed the giant striker in 1995 for £1.8 million. He was a disaster. He looked cumbersome, slow, and completely disinterested. He made 12 appearances and scored 0 goals. When the club was relegated, he refused to return from a loan spell in Italy, leading to the club tearing up his contract. He was the anti-Gianfranco Zola, a player who made Italian football look outdated rather than elegant. He retired shortly after, leaving Forest fans wondering what the scouts had actually seen in him. Igor Stepanovs became a cult hero at Arsenal for all the wrong reasons. Signed in 2000 after an injury to Tony Adams, Stepanovs was thrust into a game against Manchester United at Old Trafford. Arsenal lost 6-1, and Stepanovs was at fault for at least 4 of the goals. Dwight Yorke treated him like a training cone. Despite that performance, he actually earned a Premier League winner's medal in 2002, making him one of the most decorated worst players ever. He earned 100 caps for Latvia and played in Euro 2004, proving he was a solid international defender. But in the high-stakes environment of Arsenal, he was out of his depth. He moved to Grasshoppers in Switzerland and later coached the Latvian national team. His career stats: 17 appearances, 1 winner's medal, and a lot of traumatized Arsenal defenders. Bruno Cheyrou was touted by Gerard Houllier as the new Zinedine Zidane when he arrived at Liverpool in 2002. It was a comparison that doomed him from day one. Cheyrou was a decent technical player, but he had none of Zidane's grace or impact. He scored a winner against Chelsea at Stamford Bridge, but that was his only real contribution. He looked lightweight and struggled with the physicality of the English game. He made 31 appearances over 2 seasons before being loaned out repeatedly. He eventually found success back in France with Rennes and Bordeaux. He currently works in recruitment for Lyon, where hopefully he is more careful with his player comparisons. Albert Luque was Newcastle's big £9.5 million signing from Deportivo La Coruña in 2005. He had been a star in Spain, known for his clinical finishing and pace. In England, he was a ghost. He suffered an injury early on and never recovered his confidence. He scored 1 goal in 21 appearances, a chip against Sunderland that gave him a temporary reprieve, but he was largely a passenger. He moved to Ajax in 2007, where his decline continued. He represents the luxury signing that a struggling team simply couldn't afford to carry. His defense of his time at Newcastle was that the style of play didn't suit him. The fans' defense was that he never looked like he was trying. Roberto Jimenez is a name that West Ham fans will never forget. During the 2019-2020 season, first-choice keeper Łukasz Fabianski got injured, and Roberto stepped in. What followed was a series of errors so profound they defied logic. He punched the ball into his own net against Burnley, and looked terrified every time a cross came into the box. In his 8 games, West Ham didn't win once, and his confidence was so shot that the fans started cheering when the opposition didn't score. He was eventually shipped out to Alaves. He had a long career in Spain and Greece with multiple trophies, but his 2-month spell in East London was statistically one of the worst by a keeper in Premier League history. Yaya Sanogo was the chaos factor at Arsenal. Signed for free in 2013, Sanogo was a tall, awkward striker who looked like he was constantly about to fall over. He famously scored 4 goals in a preseason game against Benfica, but in the Premier League, he managed 0 goals in 20 appearances. He did, however, help Arsenal win the 2014 FA Cup, providing the pressure that led to the winning goal. He was a player who defenders hated playing against because they had no idea what he was going to do, mostly because Sanogo didn't seem to know either. He eventually moved to Toulouse and later to Huddersfield. His career is a mix of cult hero status and genuine tactical confusion. Salif Diao was one of Liverpool's World Cup buys after Senegal's 2002 run. He was meant to be a powerhouse midfielder but spent most of his time being played out of position by Gerard Houllier. He was slow, prone to mistakes, and never looked comfortable on the ball. He made 37 appearances for Liverpool before becoming a journeyman, eventually finding a home at Stoke City where his destroyer style was more appreciated. He is a prime example of a player who was a star for his country but a flop for his club due to the jump in quality. Kleberson arrived at Manchester United on the same day as Cristiano Ronaldo. One became the greatest player in history, the other became a footnote. Danny Drinkwater is the most recent example of a big money move gone wrong. Chelsea paid £35 million for the man who had anchored Leicester's title-winning midfield. He played 12 games in his first season and then essentially disappeared. He spent years on the bench or on disastrous loan spells at Burnley and Aston Villa, where he was involved in off-pitch incidents. He retired in 2023, admitting that his time at Chelsea was a shambles. He earned millions but lost the best years of his career. He represents the danger of being the complementary piece of a great team. Without N'Golo Kante beside him, his weaknesses were exposed. Stephane Guivarc'h is the only man to win the World Cup as a starting number 9, while failing to score a single goal in the tournament. Newcastle signed him in 1998 for £3.5 million. He played 4 games, scored 1 goal, and was sold the moment Kenny Dalglish was sacked. Ruud Gullit arrived and told him he wasn't needed. He went back to France and continued to score goals for Auxerre. He is the ultimate trivia answer, a World Cup winner who couldn't cut it in the Premier League. He now sells swimming pools in France, a career that is hopefully more relaxing than his time at St. James Park. Every league has its busts. The players who were too slow, too fragile, or just plain lucky to be there. But in the Premier League, where every mistake is televised and every stat is scrutinized, these failures become part of the legend. These players didn't just fail, they failed in front of millions. And that's it. If you enjoyed this video, I'll be posting more deep dives into the weird world of football every day. I'd love it if you could subscribe, it really helps the channel. Thanks for watching.